we're going to start with a presentation by Tobias Leenaert, Making Compassion Easier, a pragmatic and inclusive approach to helping animals. He's going to be talking for an hour. After that, we break out into workshops. So the first workshop, parallel workshops, the first one at 12 o'clock. So in the main hall, it will be Enriching Our Shelters on a Shoestring Budget by Steve Govard. The second one in the hall number 1 will be Dr. Chinni and Norma. They'll be taking Introduction to Animal Experimentation, Where We Are and the Way Forward. And the third one, the one which was not done yesterday, by Bhavani Giddu, which is the Print and Press, Creating Persuasive Narratives for Animals to the Media. So that is the first set of workshops. Then we'll have lunch. Before lunch, again a reminder, a group photograph. At 2 o'clock after lunch, the second set of workshops in the main hall, running an on-site first aid program by Tausif Rahman and me. The second one in hall number 1 will be by Varda, Caring for Yourself and Others, Conflict, Compassion, Fatigue and Self-Care. And the third one by Mr. Sanjay Patra, NGO Management, the ABC of Compliance, Finance, Registration and Governance. Then the third set of workshops would be at 3 o'clock. In this hall, Cezanne would take Pooch Paradise, Understanding Dogs and How That Shapes Our Rescues, Shelters and Adoptions. In hall number 1, Mr. Kamboj and Atul Sareen will be taking on caring for cows, improving facilities for bovines. And in hall number 2, Shweta and Smridhi will be starting a vegan advocacy program in your city. And at 4 p.m., we'll have Mr. Karlekar taking a session on media and animals, challenges and opportunities. And at 4:30, it will be the closing ceremony. So it's been an amazing 3 days. That is the third day. And I don't know how many, I've been hearing that a lot of people have planes to catch. So, if I don't see you in the afternoon or evening, just a big thank you to all of you for attending. You've been an amazing audience, and I have learned a lot, and I think I'm sure each one of us has met some amazing people that have been doing such wonderful work, either individually or through the organizations that they volunteer or work for. So a big hand of applause to all of us. So I'd like to invite Tobias onto stage. Just a little bit about him. Tobias Leenaert is the author of How to Create a Vegan World. He's a long-time speaker, trainer, and strategist. He's also the co-founder and former director of the Belgian organization EVA, Ethical Vegetarian Alternative, the first vegetarian vegan organization to receive structural funding from a national government. Under his management, EVA launched a successful campaign that resulted with the city of Ghent becoming the first city ever to officially support a weekly vegetarian day. Tobias gives animal advocacy trainings worldwide together with Melanie Joy for the Center of Effective Vegan Advocacy, CEVA. He's also co-founder of Pro-Veg International, a new international pro-vegan food awareness organization with a mission to reduce the global consumption of animals by 50% by the year 2040. Passionate about effectiveness, he regularly writes for his blog, The Vegan Strategist, and is the author of How to Create a Vegan World, a Pragmatic Approach. Ladies and gentlemen, Tobias Leenaert.
Hi. It's great to be here. I was in India 10 years ago for the first time, and I see some things have changed since then and some things have not. I see some things that are hard to see, like animals in the street, which I'm not used to. And I saw this moving video about elephants, and it makes me a little sad to see all these things and to know that so many animals need help. But there's one emotion stronger than that sadness, and that's the joy in seeing that you're all here to do this work and to help these creatures that need your help. So thank you very much. It's really wonderful to go everywhere in the world and to meet a community everywhere that wants to help animals. So I changed the title of my talk because I got a lot more time. So I'll be talking about how we can create a better movement for animals. I'll just say something about myself first. I was 10 or 12 years old when I was wondering about the difference between the dog beneath the fireplace in our house and the cow across the street in the meadow in the rain. And I was wondering, what is the morally relevant difference that justifies for me that I eat the one and I pet the other? And I could not find any morally relevant difference, so I said, okay, I have to become a vegetarian. I have to stop eating animals. And the problem was that I loved eating meat very, very much. And I continued to do so for 10 years, and it was only at university that I read this book, Animal Liberation by Peter Singer. And then slowly but surely I went vegetarian and then vegan. And I discovered all these wonderful issues related to meat, all these possible solutions that we can create when we tackle the subject of meat and animal products consumption. I went to the US to do internships in animal rights organizations. I founded an organization in Belgium. After 15 years, I burned out from leadership. This is not me, but it could be me. And I was at home for quite a while, and then I reinvented myself as somebody who looks at the movement on a meta level and tries to see where we can do better, tries to see what strategies work and what doesn't work. And so I've been blogging about that, I've been writing about that, I've been training people or instructing people on effective strategies together with Melanie. We are giving 3 trainings here in India. And I wrote this book, How to Create a Vegan World. And you all know, I think, that if we want to help animals, food is one of the things we really need to look at. Because 99% of the animals that are killed and that are suffering, they are killed and suffer for food. This is a plant-based world. You see, you see the broccoli there, and this is all grains, and it's a world composed of plant products. And I think that's an idea, or that gives us an idea of a world with a lot less suffering. And that's the idea I try to examine in my book, try to examine, like, how can we get to such a world that is more compassionate for animals, where we don't use their products. And so in my book, I explain in a couple of chapters how we could maybe do that. And I use a metaphor of a trek to Veganville, a long hike. Veganville is a city on top of a mountain, and we want everybody to live there. And if you're not vegan, or not even vegetarian, the concepts that I will illustrate in this talk are pretty much useful for everybody, I think. But the idea is, like, how do we get people to do something, basically, to do something that is, for many people, quite difficult. That's why Veganville is on top of a mountain. It's difficult to get there. And I talk about how to motivate people. I talk about how to argue for vegetarianism or veganism, like which motivators to use. I talk about which messages to use. I talk about changing the environment around us, restaurants and products, etc. But today I'm going to talk about 4 values that I think our movement, our wonderful vegetarian, vegan, animal rights movement can use more of. And these values that I want to discuss are open-mindedness, empathy, rationality, and positivity. And it's not just a vegan or animal rights movement that can use more of these. It's also the world in general. I don't know how public discourse is in India on social media, but where I come from and what I see in the US and in Europe, it's pretty bad. I mean, sometimes you have the impression that we've lost all civility. And I think we have, or we could have, more productive relationships, conversations with each other if we apply these values. So let me start with open-mindedness. So I wasn't a vegetarian all my life. Maybe some of you were. This is the country where there's most chance that you have a lot of people that were vegetarian all their life. But I was born, I would say, into an ideological box that Melanie calls, or Melanie uses the concept carnism. So if you're in that box, if you're in that ideological box, you're not questioning things. You're not questioning what you eat. It's all normal. It's normal to eat dairy and eggs and meat. But then, for me, at some point, the light went, I got a little restless in my box, and the light went on, and the box opened, and I jumped out as a vegetarian or a vegan. Maybe that's the same for some of you. And I started to learn about these wonderful advantages of being vegetarian or vegan, and I was talking about them to everybody. But then I discovered that after a while, I had maybe become trapped inside another box. And I could call this the box of veganism. And again, I was feeling that my thinking was being limited by this ideology. And you can recognize if you're in that box, if you have like fixed answers to questions. If you think that the questions are answered now and forever. So if you say like veganism is this, or you're not vegan if you do that, or no, you're not vegetarian if you do that, like these very fixed answers that many people in our movement have. And this cartoon illustrates it very well, I think. This guy says, I'm mostly vegan, but, and the other one says, if there's a but, you're not vegan. You know, the idea that we should not question things, I think that's a very bad idea. And I think if you look at discussions, I don't know if you, I'm sure you have them here as well in Facebook groups, discussions about who is vegetarian and who's not, and who's vegan and who's not, and maybe who's a Hindu and who is not, etc. Then the way vegans solve these discussions, many vegans solve these discussions, is by looking back to 1944 to this guy, Donald Watson, who coined the term vegan and who said what it was, who described it what it was, who defined it. And people say, look, this guy defined it in 1944 and we don't have to question it anymore. That reminds me very much of a religious attitude where you go back to scripture and you say, like, look, we have all the answers. And that is not, I think, a good idea. Just to be clear, if you have to be in a box, it's better to be in this box than in this box, of course. But it's still better, I think, to be in no box at all. So being vegan or vegetarian means giving up meat, means giving up animal products. It doesn't mean giving up thinking. Okay, thinking is vegan. You're allowed to think. You have to think. You have to be aware of dogma. Dogma is the idea that we have all the answers, and if we are dogmatic, it prevents us from improving. And we have to improve constantly because you know that the challenge ahead of us is immense. We are trying to convince 7 billion people to be kinder and more compassionate to animals. That's a huge, huge task, and we have to constantly improve if we ever want to get this done. So open-mindedness, some questions that can help you be open-minded is to ask, have I thought about this thoroughly? Did I give this enough thought? Is there any information that I might be missing on this topic? Do I have any biases, like confirmation bias? You know what confirmation bias is? It's like to look for the answers that you want to find. And something that I call slow opinion. Slow opinion is about standing still for a while and thinking like, maybe I shouldn't rush to an opinion. Maybe I don't need to have an opinion about this because I'm not informed enough at this point. Maybe when somebody gives you another opinion than what you have, you don't disagree right away. But you think like, maybe she has a point. And you pause and you say like, can you give me some more information because I'm maybe not informed enough. Let me give you one example where you can test how open-minded you are. This is a difficult example. I'm just giving this example to see how open-minded you can be. So this is a lion who's starving in the wild, starving from hunger, a lioness. And let's just assume she's not starving because of humans. let's just assume she's starving for natural causes. And my question is, does it matter to you or to us or to the lion what the cause of her suffering is, whether that's humans or it's nature? And this question is meant to tease out your assumptions about which animals we have to help. Do we only have to help the animals for whose suffering we are responsible? Or would it be also interesting to help the wild animals? And this is a topic that's getting more and more traction in animal rights philosophy, the idea that maybe we should also help animals whose suffering we're not responsible for. Just to see, you can think about this in your bed tonight, just to see how open-minded you are. The second one is empathy. This is, I think, a nice iconic image of the empathy that is very natural to us in the animal rights, animal protection movement. This is Anita Krajins from the SAVE movement in the US, in Canada. And she gave water to pigs who were waiting to go to the slaughterhouse, and she got actually sued for that. She was brought before trial, but fortunately she got acquitted. She was not found guilty. But it's a beautiful image to show how compassionate we are towards animals. Now my question is, yes, we are compassionate towards pigs and cows and chickens and dogs and cats, but how compassionate, how empathic are we towards people who eat meat and hunters and people who do all kinds of terrible things with animals like bullfighters? Can we also show empathy towards these people? And that's not really easy for us, or for many of us. Maybe some of you, I'm in India, after all, maybe some of you are enlightened, but I'm not. And being compassionate towards the people who harm animals is sometimes hard. And maybe some of you say, like, do we really have to have empathy for everybody? This is Gary Yourofsky. He's like a famous activist who is well known for his like confrontational approach. He's not the most compassionate person towards people. And let me oppose him right here to this guy. Does anybody know him? He's a Buddhist monk from Vietnam. His name is Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a famous writer. He's a vegan also. And he, in his vegan advocacy, he's very compassionate, very calm, very Zen-like. And I'm not saying one approach is always right and one is always wrong, but I'm saying that I think this compassionate, calm, soft approach with people is almost always appropriate. And again, maybe some of you say, like, no, there's people doing such terrible things that it's not appropriate to have empathy for them. Let me give you an example. These guys, white supremacists, they're pretty horrible people, it seems, right? Doing pretty horrible things, racists. But let me introduce you to this guy, Daryl Davis, who's a black activist. He spent most of his childhood outside of the US, but he came back at a time in the 70s to the US, and he was walking around in a 4th of July parade, the national parade in the US. And all of a sudden, people were throwing things at him. He was the only black person in that parade. And so for the first time in his life, he was confronted with racism. And he said, how can these people hate me if they don't even know me? How can these people hate me if they don't even know me? And then he said, well, I don't know them either. And so what he did, instead of like judging them right away, he set out to know them, to get to know these racists, these horrible people. And he built up relationships with them. He visited them at their house. He had conversations with them. And because of that, about 200 people of the Ku Klux Klan, a racist white supremacist clan, they left their beliefs. They gave up their racist beliefs. They said to him, you have convinced me. And as a sign, as a token of their conversion, they gave him their robes to show, like, look, I'm not part of this anymore. And this guy was successful with convincing these people, with changing these people. And he was successful because this is a documentary about him. I don't know if you have Netflix here. I think so, right? It's on Netflix in my country. he was successful, I think, because he had empathy. He had an open mind. He was prepared to listen and to ask questions. He was curious as to where they were coming from. That is not an easy assignment. I'm not saying everybody of us should do that. But if you can do it, I think it can be pretty successful. To try to understand and to build rapport with people, to build relationships rather than isolating them and thinking that they're completely different from us, that they don't share any values at all with us. I don't think that's the easiest way to change people or to change society. So to be more empathic, understand the situation that we're in. In terms of vegetarianism, veganism, here's a question that I could ask you. Why do most people eat meat? And most people in Europe or in the US, most people means 99, 98%, right? Here it means a little bit less. But why do most people eat meat? You can think of a lot of answers. And I think one of the answers is most people eat meat because most people eat meat. People do what other people do. They look at other people, they look around them in society, and they say, like, oh, everybody's doing it. It can't be wrong, can it? So we need to create a critical mass of people who are not participating in this. But what you have to realize, if you are vegetarian or vegan today, you are part, certainly vegan here, part of a very tiny minority. This is what we call the adoption of innovation curve, and it's usually used to explain the adoption of new technology. Like, I would say certainly in Europe, if somebody doesn't have a smartphone there today in 2018, if you don't have a smartphone, you would be considered a laggard, somebody who stays behind, a slow person. If you had a smartphone already in 1995 or 2000, you would have been considered an innovator or an early adopter. Have you ever heard those terms? Now, in the field of food, if you're vegan today here, you're certainly an innovator. You belong to the group of the first 2% of the people to do something. And you have to understand that other people are going to be slower. We cannot expect from everybody that they will move at the same speed as us. And maybe these people are faster in other ways, and we are slower in other ways. But we have to appreciate differences and appreciate people and appreciate where they're coming from. We are, in a sense, the people who are already there are the low-hanging fruit, the people who it was easy to reach. I would be vegan still if I could only eat water and bread. You know, I want to make sacrifices, but not everybody wants to do that. And that's something that is a reality. Secondly, to be more empathic, realize you don't have all the information. And that's an exercise you can always make several times a day. Let me give you an example. I sometimes get angry and irritated, and sometimes like really furious. One of the examples is when I'm in traffic and there's like somebody passing me by at 160 kilometers an hour, and I go like, "Argh," because I think it's dangerous, and it right away, it speaks to me emotionally. And I get really, my heartbeat goes up and I get furious. And then one of the things that helps me is if I have a thought like, well, what if this person is on the way to the hospital to visit his dying grandmother? And that's probably not true. It's probably not the case. But it helps me right away to become calmer. And that's an exercise you can always do and also apply to people who disagree with you, who demonstrate different behavior than you. And you can wonder, what makes it that they're doing something else? What in their situation could be completely different from my situation? It's not always going to work. If they pass you like this on the highway, then they're definitely not on the way to the hospital to visit their dying grandmother. And thirdly, remember that empathy works. Remember this guy, Daryl Davis, this black activist who was successful in convincing these racists to change. Empathy works. If you want to be successful, if you want to have results, empathy is good. Also towards the people we really don't like. Rationality is number 3. Some examples of irrationality in our movement. I think there's a lot of irrationality often. Here is one example. Have you heard of the movie What the Health? So What the Health is a movie about the benefits of a vegetarian or vegan diet, but it got a lot of criticism because it was considered vegan propaganda. It was considered that the claims for veganism were exaggerated. I call this idea vegalomania, the idea that veganism can solve everything, can solve every health problem. Let's be realistic. Let's be scientific. Let's be evidence-based. If we stick to the facts, we can probably convince more people. The facts are spectacular enough. We don't need to overdo them. Here's another example of irrationality, in my view. So, in at least 2 countries in Europe right now, McDonald's has a vegan burger. And it's a very recent thing. And when it was introduced, I saw a lot of vegans talking about this on Facebook and discussing this the way we discuss everything. And there were people saying, like, oh, I hate this. McDonald's shouldn't do this. And I hate McDonald's, and it's evil, and it's McDeath, and I don't even go into McDonald's to pee in their bathrooms. But is this rational? I mean, to think that this is not a good thing? Like, this is a huge company that has so much power to advertise products, so much power to mainstream this vegan burger. It receives so many people every day. It means that a small group of 4 friends or a family can now go there when one of them is vegetarian or vegan, and they can all eat there and be together. And maybe other people get convinced that this is good food. I mean, it's not really good food, but it's better food than the meat burgers they serve. Or here, KFC introducing vegan nuggets. It's a good thing, but many vegans are furious. It's not rational. Big companies and their involvement are very necessary. We won't do it without them. They're not going to just disappear from one day to another. And they're also not going vegetarian or vegan from one day to another. So the only thing they can do is to slowly transform, to slowly get better. That's just the reality. And something else that I want to talk about in terms of irrationality is purity. Purity in the sense of like being very strict. And if you're religious, purity may make sense. I'm just going to consider it from a non-religious viewpoint here. And I'm going to talk about 3 ideas or 3 concepts about veganism. And you can also apply this to vegetarianism if you want. So the first is that 100% vegan, it doesn't really exist. It's very hard to be there, 100%. The second is that 99% vegan is a vegan. And the third is that there is such a thing as a 95 or a 90% vegan. And these people are very useful. And they're doing good things. So this is a message about not thinking in terms of black and white and to be tolerant. So the first is 100% vegan. And again, apply this to vegetarian if you want. So this is a list of products or ingredients from big to smaller. And you might say, like, a vegan is somebody who also avoids all these very small, minute, microscopic, very tiny ingredients that we can't even see, always at every moment. Only if you do that, you're a vegan. And if you have this opinion, then I would ask you, like, have you read this book? This book is called Veganissimo. It says there on top, Veganissimo means one who is vegan to the highest possible standard. To the highest possible standard. And this book contains 300 pages of ingredients that are or might be of animal origin. So I could say, I've read this book and I've studied it by heart and I'm applying it. And if you don't, and if you call yourself a vegan, well, don't, because you're not a vegan. And that would be such a silly attitude, because it's focusing just on details. And I see a lot of people online and in reality telling each other that they're not really a vegan, that they're not belonging to the group. I don't know if you have it here. I've heard from some friends in India that it's the same problem everywhere, also here. We can be very, very, very vegan. We can be so vegan that we don't watch Kevin Bacon movies. But it's a useless game to play. I think we have to focus on the big things, not the small things. We have to focus on where we are making a difference, where we have actually an impact on demand and on supply. These people in Europe and in America, they're called dumpster divers or freegans. They eat foods that they can find for free. I mean, I can imagine that here it's a completely different situation for some people. But so we have people who say like, well, whatever I can find for free, I'm going to eat. And if some people of them are vegan or consider themselves vegan, but if they find meat or animal products in the trash or that supermarkets are throwing away, they will eat that. And I'm fine if they want to call themselves vegan, because what they do has no impact on demand, right? Nobody is going to produce more because somebody eats what is being thrown away in the trash. Conversely, you have to also remember that it's not because a product is plant-based that it's automatically good. What could be wrong with chocolate, with vegan chocolate? What could be wrong with it? Any idea? Sugar, yeah, it's not a healthy product, but like more in the ethical realm. Slave labor, yes. Child slave labor even, right? Also, we always talk about beef requiring a lot of water, but chocolate, unfortunately, also requires a huge amount of water. So it's not very good for the environment. So just want to say, it's not because you eat vegan that you're perfect in all senses and that all these products are really perfect. Second concept is a 95% vegan. And I'm saying that this is a good thing, that this is a concept, because some people disagree, and they would say, no, there is no such thing like a 95% vegan, just like there's no such thing as a 95% pregnant woman. You are either pregnant or you are not. You are vegan or you're not. I think that's not a productive way of looking at it. It's a very binary, a very black and white way of looking at it. So if somebody wants to say, I'm 95% vegan, I mean, why not? They do a lot of the work, and it's very clear what that means, right? Raw food people, I don't know how many you have of them here, but raw food people also talk in these terms. They say, I'm 80% raw, I'm 90% raw. It's useful. And it gives people an idea or a concept of something that is a goal that they can aspire to, but there are already also many stages in between that are very useful and helpful. And thirdly, the 99% vegan, which is a concept that sometimes gets me in trouble because some vegans say like, no, it doesn't exist and you have to do, it's all or nothing. So what is an example of a 99% vegan? So imagine a vegan who says, I'm vegan, but once in a while, like 2 or 3 times a year, I go to my grandmother and I eat cookies that she made, and these cookies contain milk or eggs, and I eat them. Now, I could say, well, then you're not a vegan. But maybe she says, like, well, it's hard to explain this to my grandmother. She's 99 years old. She may be dead tomorrow. I'm not going to bother. And of course, I mean, that's fine. You know, she does it with respect for this woman. She does 99.9% of the work. Why would we say that she's not one of us? Why would we say you don't belong to the group? That's silly. Look at it this way. I'll skip this. If this is the number of meals you have in a year, and if one of them is not vegan or not vegetarian, this one there, that meal would still contain some plant products. So part of that meal would be animal products. If you eat like this, you would eat, or you would be 99.7% vegan. That's vegan enough, right? That's no reason to tell somebody you don't belong to the club. So let's get rid of this black and white idea that you're either part of the problem or part of the solution. I think people who make a conscious effort and who make a significant effort, they're already part of the solution. I'm not worried about, I don't know if this picture makes sense here, I don't think so. Oh, it does? Oh, it's world famous? Okay. So this is Manuel from Faulty Towers, and he's a waiter in this hotel. I'm not worried about confused waiters. Like people say, like, look, if we don't make it clear to the waiter what veganism is, they will be confused and they will give us that we don't want to eat. And yeah, it could happen. But is that our first worry? I mean, we're in a world where 70 billion animals are killed just for food alone. And then we're going to worry about a little confusion. I don't think that's a priority. I'm also not worried about watering down veganism or creating like a 98% vegan world. First of all, if we would get there, that would already be terrific. But secondly, if we get there, the rest will take care of itself. It will not be economically viable anymore to have 2% of animal products. We will have found solutions and alternatives for that by then. So don't worry about not getting there all the way. I'm worried about alienating meat eaters. People saying, like, what is this? Is this a religion? I can't get my head around how you think because it's not rational. I'm worried about alienating vegans. I see so many people in our movement, in the vegan movement, who are saying, like, well, I don't feel I belong. I've been in this Facebook group and in that Facebook group, and they were talking to me that I was not a real vegan, and they were criticizing me because I did this and I did that. That's not useful. We have to create a big group. We're not about creating the world's smallest club, right? We're not about raising the price of membership so high that nobody can join us. I'm worried about recidivism, which means like sliding back. It means like some people who are vegetarian or vegan, they give it up. One of the reasons they give it up is that they find it too difficult. But it's only as difficult as we make it. We can make it very, very difficult. And again, we can make the price so high, nobody can join. That's not the idea. I'm worried about signaling. Signaling means like, let's suppose that you go to a conference or that the government wants to know how people are eating. And they ask like, yeah, tick the right box. And then you are a vegan, but you are one of the vegans who like goes to your grandmother and eats her cookies. And you say like, okay, I cannot call myself a vegan. And then you take the vegetarian box. But that's a pity, right? That's unfortunate because you're signaling that there's less of us than there actually are. Because for all practical purposes, you are vegan. And I'm worried about making a small group of people even smaller. Vegetarians here are a big group. Vegans here are a very small group. Somebody said about 1,000 activists in India on a population of 1.3 billion people. They're tiny everywhere. They're hardly in any country over 2%, usually less. Tiny group. If we want to change things, we'll have to get a lot bigger. We have to create critical mass. That's not going to happen by telling everybody they can't join. So instead of looking at this in terms of black and white, vegan or non-vegan, binary, let's look at this as a spectrum, okay? From being all meat eater to being the perfect vegan, and so many things in between. Vegetarians, reducers, almost vegans, people who do it one time a week, etc. And they're all very useful. Why is that? It's because they create critical mass. At least in other countries outside India. The critical mass, the demand for vegetarian products comes from people who reduce in the first place because there's many more of them than there are vegetarians and vegans. And here also, maybe you could say that, for instance, demand for alternative dairy products, for soy milk, it may not come in the first place from the vegans. It may come from all kinds of people who want to try non-dairy products for several reasons, right? So if you look at the market, the global worldwide dairy market, the market for fluid milk, already 12% is taken by non-dairy milk. 12% of milk sold in the world is non-dairy. But of course, there's not 12% of vegans. So what you see here is that most of this 12% milk is bought by non-vegans. People who do this for all kinds of different reasons, for health, for allergy, for whatever. But the point is, it doesn't matter what reason that they have, because what they do is they drive up demand, and if demand becomes higher, producers will produce for them. So if today I haven't seen the supermarkets here, but in where I come from, we have all these different kinds of non-dairy milk. These are not there because of the vegans. These are there because of all these people who reduce their dairy consumption for whatever reason. So the point here is that the people who reduce, they make it easier for everybody to go further and further in this direction. So they're very, very strategically very important. So maybe one thing you could do is you might have very high expectations of yourself in terms of like being very, very vegetarian or very, very vegan, but you could have different expectations from other people. You could have lower expectations from them. They don't have to meet your expectations necessarily. You can make a distinction. You can also maybe distinguish your behavior in private and in public. Like I'm going to be, when I'm in private, I'm going to be very, very strict about my diet. And I'm going to be inspecting the things I buy. I'm going to look at the ingredient list. When I'm with people, I'm going to be a little less strict because I don't want to give the impression that being vegan is a very, very difficult thing. So sometimes I'm not going to look at that ingredient list. I may say, I'm not sure if this is entirely right, but I'm not going to take their bottle of whatever that they served for me and look and what is in there, because I don't want to give the impression that it's hard. And I think we have to be concerned about the image we create of vegetarianism, veganism, vegans. We have to make sure it's something that people can aspire to, that they find attractive, that they say, yes, I can do this, I want to join. If we make it a very, very sad thing, a very humorless thing, a very strict and rigid thing, I don't think many people will join. Only the very motivated ones will join. And consistency is something that people worried about. People worried about diluting the message by being inconsistent. I would say you can be consistent with different things. You can be consistent with what the definition of veganism is, with the rules. But the rules shouldn't be the goal. The goal should be to reduce suffering and to reduce exploitation. So you can be consistent with results, consistent with outcomes. Let me give you an example of that. There's an example just imagine that if you're not vegan, imagine that you're vegan and you go to a town. This is not particularly Indian food, but you go to a town and there's one restaurant and they offer a vegetarian burger and a vegan burger. And you go there with a friend who is non-vegan. And the thing is that this vegetarian burger, the vegan burger, is really not good. You know, you've been there before. You've tasted it, it's bad. But the vegetarian burger is really tasty. So now my question would be, imagine you're a strict vegan. What do you recommend your friend eats? What do you buy for them? The vegan or the bad vegan burger? Or the really tasty vegetarian burger? So this is a question of what are you consistent with here? With your rules or with the outcome? My opinion, and I'm not saying what you should do, is that if a person eats a bad vegan product, that's not a good thing. We call it a BTE, a bad tofu experience. If you give people a bad food experience, you set them back. You lose a lot of time. You lose a lot of effort. And they will say oh my God, how can you taste this? But when you give them a good product, even if it's not the ideal product, they will say oh my God, this is good. I can have this again. So the result would be that even though you have not offered him the ideal product that is not in accordance with your rules, you were consistent with the outcome, with the result, because the result is that they have a better image of vegetarianism, veganism than before. If you give them the bad product, that's not going to be the case. So if you look at your personal impact on animal suffering, and if you just look at food, you have a certain impact with what you eat. If you are a lifelong vegetarian or vegan, you save a certain number of animals. But the impact that you can have by talking to other people is, of course, potentially a lot higher, because you can talk to a lot of people and all of them could change, right? So in this sense, what goes into your mouth is less important than what comes out of it. I'm not saying you should not be vegetarian or vegan. It's a very good thing. And the more vegan you can be, the better. But don't lose sight of how you advocate and of the importance of that. And advocacy and activism, and those of you who are not yet into activism, can take so many different shapes. And it's not because you say like, well, this doesn't attract to me, this doesn't appeal to me, I don't want to be in the street, I don't want to have protest signs. I mean, you can do all kinds of things. This is useful, but also donations can be useful if you can spare some money for an organization here in India. That's also activism. Or you can be maybe an entrepreneur, you can be working with food, you can be giving cooking lessons. That's also activism. And if you're too lazy to do anything else than sit behind your computer, you can also do activism there. You can post wonderful pictures of food on your Facebook or your social media feeds and show people how wonderful it is to be vegetarian or vegan. Only nice-looking pictures, okay, of food, not something like this. It's not because you made it that it looks good. Finally, the fourth point is positivity. And in a way, I think we should all be a little bit more like dogs. You know, they always look happy. I mean, most of them. I think we should be positive because when we're positive, it's a lot more sustainable for us, for ourselves, and we are better at recruiting people to our movement, to our group, when we're positive. So in a sense, positivism or optimism is a moral duty because you can achieve more through positivism. Of course, we don't have to be naive. Not everything is going to be okay. Sometimes we do have to resist. If we don't resist this man, things are not going to be all right. So don't always think like, oh, everything is going to be fine. We have to take action as well. But there's horrible things happening in the world, and I know it's not always easy to be positive. It's not always easy to think the best of people. Like, I'm particularly sensitive about these bullfighters. I think like, if I just let myself go, I would say horrible things about them. But one thing that helps me is this quote, which I like. Those who deserve love the least need it the most. The people who've done something wrong, they're probably most helped when we can love and support them. But it's exactly the opposite that happens in our society. When people do something wrong, we lock them up, we retire all our love and all the support from them, and we think that somehow this is going to make things better. It's not. This is the moment when they need us the most. But it's also the moment when it's the hardest to give that love and that support for us. So it's a bit of a paradox. One way to look at it is like this. This is a scene from a movie, a French movie called La Belle Verte, The Green Beautiful. And it's about an alien civilization somewhere else in our galaxy. And this alien civilization, they look like us, but they're enlightened. And once in a while, they undertake missions to other planets to help them get more civilized. And one day, somebody asks, who wants to go to Earth? And everyone goes, no, not me, not Earth. Because Earth is a very primitive planet. Nobody wants to go there. But one woman, one brave woman says, okay, I'll go to Earth. And she travels to Earth. And because she is enlightened, every person she gets in contact with changes. And one of these encounters is a woman who just leaves a butcher shop. And the alien says to her, what did you do in there? What is this? And she says, like, this is a butcher shop. I bought meat. And the alien asks her, why? Why did you buy meat? And the woman says, well, it's food, of course. And through this little encounter, the alien walks away, and this woman, she takes the meat from the package, and she drops down on the pavement, and she looks at it like this. And for the first time, she questions what she's doing because of her encounter with this being. And what's happening today is actually that this is happening on a much bigger scale. And in a sense, you could say that we're the first species to question their own diet. No tiger has ever done that. And that's a beautiful place in evolution to have arrived at. And we do a lot of things wrong as humans. We do a lot of shit. And some of you may want to press the button and make humanity disappear. I think we also do a lot of beautiful things. And we have the capacity in us to become a really beautiful species. And this is one of the signs. It's not easy for a species to say, like, what is this? Maybe I should not eat this. That's a special point to have arrived at. As far as we know, no other species in history in our galaxy has ever done that. So let's cherish that. We have a long history behind us, 1 million years of being human. It's only in the last couple of thousand years that we developed culture and arts and significant form of morality. And we have a big future ahead of us. And there's nothing that says that future should be negative. We will still continue, we can still continue to improve in terms of technology and morality and spirituality. We can become a lot better people. Now, if you don't trust me and if you say like this positive stuff is just bullshit, and maybe tonight you're watching another sad video on YouTube and you hate humanity, then one thing you could do is you can go to Google and you can enter pictures to restore your faith in humanity. And you really have to do that. If you do that, you will find pictures like this man giving water to a koala in a forest fire, or these guys saving a sheep from drowning in a wild river, or these cops in traffic agents in Asia helping a duck cross the street. Or finally, my favorite, this fireman giving a cat back to his person. And you see that the cat is not very much impressed. But you can see the emotion on this woman's face. You can see how happy she is to be again with this being that belongs to another species. And that's very special. And I know this is not a pig or a cow or a chicken, and she may very well have meat on her plate tonight. But at the very least, she loves this animal. And that's something beautiful. That's something that should inspire us, that should give us hope about people, and that's a great place to start. Thank you very much.
Pure rationalist and has delved into the debate of rational versus irrational thought. Thank you for taking a logical and pragmatic approach rather than a more emotionally centric one. However, I kind of see that there might be a bit of philosophical loopholes in what you're saying. It's wonderful, but it seems like it's an idealization. Simply because if humanity has a cyclical need to create a doctrine, so we imagine in our current state that meat eating is this negative thing, and that we slowly, if we can transition to all veganism, more and more so on the spectrum, that we'd have an idealized utopia. But wouldn't that just probably lead to another problem, where veganism itself then would be the problem, and there'd be people like us activating against veganism?
That is entirely possible, and that is why I want to talk about these values, to kind of prevent that. And I could say that even, I talked about these boxes. So you have the vegetarian, the carnistic box, and then the vegetarian or vegan box.
Yeah.
It's perfectly also even possible that you or me, we end up in the pragmatic box.
Absolutely.
That becomes our ideology.
Yes.
So we have to be constantly
Evolving,
aware,
yes. Yeah.
and open-minded and critical to make sure that we do the best that we can.
I think we also have to be very careful to not make veganism a doctrine, or any, because I think the tendency is once we take a good idea and we start spreading it, the need is for it to become a doctrine or almost a norm. And I think the only way for veganism to survive that is to be constantly evolving in how it's advocated and how it's spread globally.
I would agree. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Tobias, I'm here. Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Thank you. Fantastic approach to making us understand a lot of difficult concepts. I have one theory of divisive veganism that you didn't touch upon in detail. I'd like to get your view on that, which is when somebody who's switched over to a vegan diet and calls himself a vegan is often put down as saying, oh, we can't call him vegan, we must call him a plant-based dietitian or plant-based diet man. Have you encountered a statement like this, and how have you managed that situation?
Yeah, so the idea is that if you're not vegan for moral reasons, you're not really vegan, but you are a plant-based person, right? That's what you mean?
Beg your pardon?
If you're not vegan for moral reasons, for ethical reasons, then you should call yourself a plant-based person. That's the idea?
See, it's like this, right? Most people have realized that they need to switch over to a vegan diet before they realize that it's more than just the diet. It's about the leather you wear, the silk you wear, etc.
Yeah.
But they're often like you said, they're often alienated because they haven't really understood the full concept, and they're only switching over for health reasons.
Right. Yeah, so it's a matter of the reasons that they're not for ethical reasons, and it's also a matter of like if you don't do it for ethical reasons, then you will not. If you do it for health reasons, you will still wear leather shoes, etc. I'm comfortable with if these people want to call themselves vegan, it's fine for me. I mean, I will still discuss with them, and to my mind, these people could be very open to grow because they're not defensive anymore. They already know that the food tastes good, right? So I would not make any effort to like oust them from the club because I don't think that's very good. And I think making this distinction is only making this small group of people even smaller, which is, I think, not a good idea. We see a lot of people who evolve from being health vegans to becoming ethical vegans. We know that from research as well.
You had just said we are the first species to question our diet, and the lion has never done that. So,
to my knowledge.
So, but the lion follows its natural instinct.
Yes.
And the humans, if they were to follow their natural instinct, it's the one we say you place an apple or a chicken in front of a child and see which one he eats and which one he plays with. Since the human diet is determined and dictated by religion, region, availability, habit, health benefit notions, and so on, everyone sitting in this room as a human species does not have the same diet. So why did we compare the questioning of a human diet with one of a tiger's?
So what I mean is I don't know if I was entirely clear, but I mean that we have achieved or we have come to a point where we are capable of saying, look, the things I eat, they have ethical implications. They have moral implications. So I could maybe, if I find this important, I could change that. And all I want to say is that to have developed the cognitive apparatus to be able to make that kind of reasoning and decisions, that's a beautiful thing, and that is not, I think, to my knowledge, been achieved so far by any other species. That's all I mean with it.
Advocates can access when so much of research and data is funded by corporate interests versus pure scientific interests. How does one sift through all that?
I mean, yes, this is a question that pertains to like all kind of knowledge right now and trying to know everything these days, anything these days. I would say yes, you can. There's people who want to say like meat is healthy because they have their agenda. On the other hand, we also have our agenda, so we have to be aware of our own bias. I would say look at some trustworthy sources, vegan dietitians that you trust. Nandita is here, for instance. There's other people who have written books about veganism or vegetarianism and health. And I would generally trust those people. They have an agenda. They want to help animals often, but most of them are very secure in their research. Yeah, those would be my go-to sources to know what is true about health and what is not. Even though we have to always remember that there's a lot we don't know about health and that we're still finding out.
Sure, thank you. So, you know, it's even the so-called trusted sources are at some points of time questioned. We have some very good names in the vegan movement.
Yeah.
And for example, one of the WhatsApp groups, there was a debate happening about, you know, what is right, what isn't. Milk is healthy as opposed to milk being unhealthy.
Yeah.
So it kind of puts new activists in that particular group,
Yeah.
you know, in a very strange place.
Yeah.
Because suddenly, their whole notions about what is healthy, what is unhealthy is getting questioned. So-called sources of, correct information are getting questioned. So that's why, from your experience, is there, some place one can go to, or what does one do? Then it just becomes a question of instinctively, following your instincts and trusting some sources.
I mean, it's a matter of knowing some people and their work and trusting whether they do a good job and can get beyond their biases, their animal rights biases that they may have, for instance. It's, for instance, Ginny Messina is a dietitian in America that veganrd.com or .net is a dietitian that I trust personally. In general, about health, I would say we are on much safer ground when we say, look, a vegan diet can be perfectly healthy, than saying a vegan diet is the best thing there is. We don't need to prove the second thing. We only need to prove this first thing. We just need to show that, look, it can be healthy, it can have advantages for your health, and it has these advantages for animals and for environment, etc. We don't need to say, like, it's the best ever. Yeah. Maybe future will show that it is the best ever. But right now, it's probably sometimes more convincing to be a little bit modest and careful.
Yeah. Thank you so much. You can catch him.
So
he's
one
around.
last question, sir. Just I want to pose a small question. It's not very, when you are vegan, so people say that you are vegan, but your pets are not. Why can't you? It's very easy. Like, you can force your pets to be vegan. So what's your take on this?
Melanie answered this yesterday. I think this is a bit of a matter of perfectionism. I think this is not the priority. If you want to feed your pets, your dogs especially, a vegan diet, you can. But let's not blame...
How about cats? So some say that cats can't be vegan.
Cats are more difficult. There is specialized vegan cat food. I personally don't have... My girlfriend runs a cat shelter, and we don't have the best experiences with vegan cat food. But I'm sure it's a matter of time before we invent the perfect vegan cat food. So I'm sure ideologically for me it's fine. I would just say let's not make this a topic of that's worth fighting over. Because I see it a lot. I see, like, oh, you're not vegan if you don't feed your cat vegan or whatever. This is a difficult situation. We have to save all kinds of animals. They won't always thrive on a vegan diet. We can't euthanize them all or whatever. So this is a contentious, complex situation that we have to appreciate that people have different opinions about.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tobias, and for the wonderful presentation. Of our appreciation. Thank you.